Modern Madness is my research project that examines the relationship between social stigma and mental illness portrayals in mainstream movies. If you remember from the previous video, characters are consistently inaccurate and almost caricatured versions of mentally ill individuals. You may also remember that the stigma affecting how we make mental illness look in movies is the expectation that mental illness makes you a non-functioning person. In this video, we're going to see how stigma controls the use of mental illness in horror and thriller films. I warn you though, things may get spooky. Horror thriller films follow a narrative structure. What you're looking at here, or anywhere on the screen is a concept map that's meant to show the patterns of the narrative. So what exactly is happening? Well, stigma, being the context from which these films emerge, shines through power dynamics and derogatory language in films. By that, I mean that characters' mental illness experiences are affected by their intersecting identities and social status. So someone like the protagonist of Cake can get away with a lot more coping behaviors because she's a rich white woman.
Do you have prescriptions?
I thought we didn't need prescriptions.
Well, in the border, unless you have prescriptions, they will take them away.
Okay, so what do we do? What do we do?
Can we open up Mary here?
Oh, that seems really, really tricky. What if we get caught?
You're a rich white woman. Have you ever been caught at anything?
However, money doesn't make mental illness go away. Cam in Infinitely Polar Bear is still discriminated against for his bipolar disorder, despite his high social status.
That is where your great-grandmother Gaga grew up. Your great-great-grandfather was once the richest man in Boston.
So how come we're so poor?
Clearly, even in intersecting identities, mental illness has a stronghold on how you're perceived. I will mention that while there was some stuff regarding gender differences in my data set, race was not something that had enough representation for comparisons to be made. This is an issue both inside and outside films. The skew in power is reinforced by derogatory language, words like crazy, nutcase, and psycho, which is a conversational way to remind everyone that mental illness is undesirable and ridiculous.
What do you mean? How am I? What's that?
Sort of like me.
Sort of like you? I hope to God she didn't tell Nikki that.
You think that I'm crazier than you?
Because...
Since people don't see mentally ill folks in a complimentary light, the way individuals try to cope with their mental illness are discredited and belittled. Coping mechanisms in movies are actually the reason that mental illness harms the characters who possess it, as well as the people who interact with those characters. The worse things are for you, the worse things are for others, which makes you feel terrible about your mental illness, so you start relying on your coping mechanisms even more, and the cycle starts all over again. Eventually, all this cycling leaves the characters worn out, and they're at their final crossroads: to recover or not to recover.
To be or not to be? That is the question.
Characters may not necessarily be in as big of a pickle as Hamlet, but they really do only have two options. They must recover in a socially accepted way of medication and therapy, or they must resign themselves to having their lives ruined by mental illness. Whew! That was a lot to get through. Now that we have the foundation though, let's build on it by examining just how this structure is used to make horror and thriller films. I gotta say, the way filmmakers use mental illness in scary movies kills me. You get it? Yeah. Seriously though, mental illness is used as the main scare tactic. Characters develop mental illness from some kind of trauma, and as they deny their illness, they become delusional and violent. Movies end with no sign of recovery, leaving audiences convinced and terrified that mental illness to such a dangerous extreme is here to stay. Take the movie Split, for example. The protagonist is a survivor of child abuse and develops dissociative identity disorder as a result. Because he denies the worsening of his symptoms, he kidnaps young girls. His mental illness gets worse, and so does his treatment of the girls, until he's so aggressive that he becomes not only a murderer, but an animalistic supervillain.
The beast is real.
Can't you see I am not human? Kevin is a man. I am much more.
In the case of Split, the mentally ill character doesn't recover at all, making it clear to the audience that mental illness dehumanizes you. Shutter Island, however, ends on an uncertain note, with the character showing signs of relapse and recovery simultaneously. In this sense, mental illness is inescapable. Either way, the audience is shown that mental illness is something to be feared.
This place makes me wonder.
Yeah, what's that, boss?
Which would be worse? To live as a monster? Or to die as a good man?
So we know the pattern horror thriller films follow, but what were those tropes I was talking about? Well, they're basically a bunch of stereotypes attached to the mentally ill characters in the movies, like being emotionally unhinged and violent. Clinical is a film that follows a psychiatrist who suffers from PTSD because a patient of hers had a breakdown and attacked her in her office. The emotional and violent roller coaster doesn't end there, though. The protagonist becomes so unstable that she turns dangerous, and even she's targeted by yet another violent mentally ill character.
Dr. Mathis? Nora, you were wrong.
She hurts you. I can't think about it.
Too many harmful stereotypes in one movie for my taste. Another common trope in horror thriller films is the existence of an alternative reality. Shutter Island is entirely based on the constructed reality of a man with PTSD and possible dissociative identity disorder. We as an audience don't know what we've been experiencing is not the real reality until it is revealed that he is in fact a Bugsy, as he so kindly refers to the patients of the institution. Since the reveal of a fake reality is tied to the reveal of his mental illness, it is made pretty clear that mental illness directly correlates with being lost from reality.
Who are you? Tell me.
Don't you recognize me, Andrew? I've been your primary psychiatrist for the last 2 years.
We're running out of time here, Andrew. I swore before the Board of Overseers that I could construct the most radical, cutting-edge role play ever attempted in psychiatry, and it would bring you back. I thought that if we let you play this out, we could get you to see how untrue, how impossible it is.
Though not as extreme as an alternative reality, characters tend to deny their illnesses to the point of losing control. Wyatt of They Look Like People denies the severity and persistence of his symptoms, even when his hallucinations are so consistent he can't tell people apart from demons.
There's this one dream once where certain people around me didn't look human. Started with my fiance. I never want to see what she turned into again. I know it's silly, right?
Finally, binary recovery is a vital trope in horror thriller films. In every case, recovery is not achieved by the end of the movie, reinforcing the terrifying nature of mental illness. Since mental illness is the main scare tactic of the movies, it makes sense for it to be unresolved. That way audiences are unsettled long after they leave their seats. Alright, well now you know a little bit more about the confinements of mental illness portrayal in scary movies. Doesn't it make sense that the way mental illness is shown is inaccurate, since movies have to follow such a repetitive and boring structure? Maybe one day we'll have a mainstream horror movie with both mental illness and accurate character development. But until that day comes, we might as well keep talking about issues like this. If you want to see how drama films have the same confinements but different issues, check out the next video in this series.